Have you ever really thought about what it would take to survive totally on your own in a wild rainforest? For us humans, it takes years and years of education. But it turns out we're not the only ones. High up in the rainforests of Sumatra and Borneo, another species has its own kind of school. And believe me, the curriculum is intense. So that brings us to this really fascinating question. Most animals are independent in just a few weeks or months. But a young orangutan spends almost a decade with its mother. Why such a ridiculously long childhood? Well, the answer isn't just about growing bigger. It's about growing smarter to master a really, really complex world. And it all starts right here. For the first several years of its life, this little infant is going to be completely and totally dependent on its mother. She's not just a source of food and safety. She is a living, breathing library of knowledge that is absolutely essential for survival. Just let that number sink in for a second. 9 years. To put that into perspective, Sumatran orangutans can nurse for more than 7 years. And even after that, they stick close to their mothers, just watching, observing, and learning everything they possibly can for a life on their own. So, what is actually happening during this super long childhood? This is not just a waiting game. Think of it more like an intensive, one-on-one apprenticeship in one of the most complicated environments on the entire planet. And this right here is the absolute key to understanding everything. Orangutans don't just run on instinct. They have culture, a huge body of knowledge about hundreds of different kinds of food, how to find them, when they're ripe, how to crack open the tough ones, and which ones will make you sick. This isn't stuff they're born with. It has to be learned. Okay, so how is this curriculum actually taught? Obviously, it's not a formal classroom with desks and a chalkboard. It's a really structured process of social learning that scientists have managed to break down into these distinct stages. And the whole process is remarkably logical when you think about it. First up, the infant gets exposure. This is simple. It's just following its mom around to her pantry, which is, spread all over the forest. Second, enhancement kicks in. Its attention gets laser focused on the specific food its mother is eating or touching. And third, and this is the most critical part, is peering. This is intense, up-close observation, watching every single tiny move she makes. And this just illustrates that transition perfectly. On the left, you've got the little one watching its mother intently. And on the right, you see a young orangutan actually putting that observation into practice, exploring, handling things, just like it saw its mom do. This is exactly how skills get passed from one generation to the next. This brings us to a really key scientific concept. The sheer amount of information an orangutan needs to survive is what scientists call a culturally dependent repertoire. Now, what that means in simple terms is this. There is just so much to learn that a single orangutan, left all on its own, could not possibly figure it all out in one lifetime. Culture isn't a bonus, it's a biological necessity. Now, that's a fair question. How do we really know they couldn't just figure it out on their own, even if it maybe took a bit longer? Well, as it turns out, researchers wanted to test that exact idea. To find the answer, they built this incredibly sophisticated computer model using over a decade of real-world data. They ran simulations where young orangutans could only learn by themselves, and then others where they could learn from their mothers. The results were, well, they were stark. Without that social learning, the young orangutan's knowledge of what to eat just never reached the level they'd need to survive as an adult. Not even close. So the study's conclusion was crystal clear and pretty powerful. Social learning isn't just helpful. It's what makes it possible for an orangutan to build up a diet that can actually sustain it. It speeds up the learning process and pushes their knowledge way past what any single individual could ever achieve alone. So this all leads us to a really critical and honestly heartbreaking problem. What happens when this ancient, perfectly tuned system of education gets broken? For an orphaned infant, it's a total loss. It loses its protector, its provider, and most critically for its future, it loses its entire curriculum and the one and only teacher it was ever meant to have. It's a catastrophic severing of that cultural knowledge. In rehabilitation centers, you have these incredibly dedicated humans who step in to try and fill that void. They provide care, they provide food and safety, but they can never, ever truly replace an orangutan mother because they teach a completely different set of lessons, and those lessons have unintended and often dangerous consequences. Yeah, the lessons learned in captivity are just fundamentally different from those taught in the wild.
And even though it's all well-intentioned, this human-led education can actually make an orangutan less prepared for life back in the forest.
Let's just look at this comparison, because it is so telling. An orangutan mother teaches survival, what to eat, where to sleep, and what to fear. A human carer, just by being there, teaches dependency, that food comes from people, that humans are safe, and that new, weird objects are probably not a threat. Researchers actually call this the captive effect, and it leads to something known as human-oriented behavior. So instead of being naturally cautious and wary of humans, like a wild orangutan would be, these individuals become curious. They might even approach people because they've learned to associate us with good things like food. And ultimately, this behavior has serious costs. This lack of fear makes them way more vulnerable after they're released. They're less aware of predators, they're not as good at finding food for themselves, and they're much more likely to wander into conflict with humans, a conflict they almost never win. And all of this, it just raises a much bigger question. Why are there so many orphans that need rehabilitation in the first place? The issue isn't really the individual orphans, it's the environment that they're coming from. The answer is tragically simple. The school itself, the huge, interconnected rainforest, is disappearing. This slide just reveals the devastating scale of the problem. Those black outlines show the historic ranges of great apes, including orangutans. In the colored areas, that's the relentless spread of agriculture, oil palm, cacao, rice, pushing directly into their home. And these are the big threats. It's not just about clear-cutting trees. Forests are being fragmented, chopped up into these small, isolated islands. They're being degraded by fires. And crucially, the canopy, that treetop highway that orangutans need to travel and feed and teach their young, is being broken, forcing them down to the ground where they're so much more vulnerable. And so that's the thought we're left with. We've seen just how absolutely essential this culture is for orangutan survival. This 9-year education passed down from mother to child through generations. So if we continue to destroy the very forest where that culture is born and taught, what hope is there for the students?